now that I have the motorcycle pretty well wired, I wanted to let you know what I did with the kill switch. The way the kill switch runs in the original bike is it closes a circuit that would go to a relay, so that when you wanted to start the bike, you'd have an electrical path closed and it would allow the starter to relay to run. If you wanted to go to kill, you flipped it up where there was no connection, it broke this electrical circuit and the motorcycle wouldn't run anymore. The way the M-Gadget works is it's looking for grounds. So since there was only a connection I could use to the run output, when I sent one side of the switch to ground and then through the run circuit into the kill switch, what would happen is when the motorcycle was in run position, I would get a kill input to the MotoGadget unit. And then when I broke the circuit, I would lose the kill input. So it was entirely backwards of the way I needed it to run. I could still make the motorcycle function, not a huge deal, except it was backwards and I didn't want it to be backwards. So I added a relay to the circuit, and here's how that works. So I still have the M-Gadget unit over here, I still have the kill switch over there. And what I want to do is use the kill switch now to energize a coil and use the switched outputs on the relay to go to the kill switch. So to do that, the first thing I had to do is get power to one side of the kill switch. So I took that from the aux output here and ran it across into the kill switch. So now I have one side. It's obviously not going anywhere because the kill switch is open in this diagram. But I ran the output side to terminal 85 on the coil, and the other side of the coil, terminal 86, to ground. Now you can see, since I have switched power on auxiliary, got power going all the way through here. Right now the kill switch is in kill position, I have nothing. Close the circuit, to run. Now I've powered the coil and the coil is now energized. So I have two options down here. A normally closed circuit, which is circuit 87A, and a normally open circuit, which is 87. So I take one side of this to ground because that's what the MotoGadget unit's looking for. And you can see that when I'm in the energized position, I pull the coil up and I pull it into 87. So I have no signal. Well, let me finish drawing the circuit. I take the 87A and run it into the kill switch. So now, as it's shown right now, power coming from aux, kill switch is in kill, so the coil is de-energized, and that leaves the ground circuit to the kill switch in 87A or grounded, and I have the kill input. So kill switch is in kill, I have the kill input. When I want to run the motorcycle, I energize the circuit by placing the kill switch to the run position. I energize the coil, it shifts the switch up here to 87, nothing took to 87, and I open the path to ground so that 87A removes the ground signal from the kill switch. So in kill, I lose the circuit, I drop naturally, I get the kill input. In run, I energize the circuit, flips this up here, I lose the kill input. So I've got it working exactly the way I want it right now. All it took was one relay, $7 inside the where I'm wiring everything else, and it worked like a champ. That's what I know. After a little bit of soul searching, I decided I couldn't live with the rat's nest that was in this motorcycle. So what I'm doing right now is I've actually pulled almost all the wiring and I've disconnected it and I'm starting to put it back. Now I've done a few things to try to help this process along. First is I've connected both my breakout board and my M-Gadget unit to a piece of steel. I've threaded holes in that and tied those down so those can't go anywhere. I've zip tied that through the bottom of this bucket, the storage bin that's going to be my wiring box. I have also changed from through holes to slots so that I can pull wiring off the bike whenever I want to much easier. And I've lined this with some split hose that I have glued in place so that I don't have any sharp edges. I've also bought some sticky back zip tie bases, and those are going to be used to keep the wires more organized. And my thought process here is that I'll kind of stick around the outside perimeter. So you can see that I've done the inputs right now. Now this has required a few things. I've actually extended some wires, and then I've cut them short so that I can keep them in a nicer, cleaner bundle here. I've made sure all my wire numbers are roughly at the same spot along the wire so I can trace them easier. And I've also mounted my one relay for the kill switch to the side of the bucket. So all that's looking a little bit nicer and neater. While I'm doing that, I am also pulling the wire bundles from the motorcycle, and you can see, I think this one I've wrapped with a little cloth tape that I think will help everything look a little bit cleaner. I'm not done with that, so I'll be doing more pulling, and I'll show a little video on that here shortly. But I think overall this will help the bike look a lot better. It'll help me trace any issues in the future, and most importantly, it'll help me sleep better at night. So here's another discovery I've had since I've been putting this back together. As I was going through the wiring, actually that's not true, as I was taking apart the speedo gauge to change a light bulb, I realized that there wasn't a mechanical connection for the tachometer, which I guess I should have realized much earlier. And so I didn't understand how the tachometer was supposed to get its readings based on the wiring I've done already. And that's when I realized that I finally understood what this piece of the diagram is. So that right there, that looks like a little diode symbol or something, is the input to the tachometer. And I'm sure that that's correct, because if you look at the original wiring diagram here, you can see that you can trace these wires out. The brown's to ground, the green with the blue dot is a switched power connection, and then the black ties right into the ignition coil. So that must be how it's getting its pulses for showing the engine speed. So I've had a small change to make, and I've sketched that in for now. I should already have power to this because the power connection is inside the gauge cluster. So that should not be an issue. It should also already be grounded for the same reason. But what I need to do is, I had not used that black connection to the tachometer input, so I'll have to tie that back into the coils. Now luckily I had an extra plug connection available, which I labeled 31 on my numbering schematic, and I can just use that, and all I have to do is go to the gauge cluster side of the plug and add that black connection in. So good little discovery there, and certainly will be nice to have a working tach. So in addition to wanting to clean up the wires inside the box, what I also thought it would be a good idea is to wrap them a little bit to kind of keep them in a tighter bundle. I found this cloth wrapping tape. It's not as, it sticks to itself really well, but it's not as sticky and messy to deal with as electrical tape, and it's designed for this type of application. I'm sure I found this on eBay or somebody. It looks like it's Maxwell brand, about 50 yards or so, which I think probably will be enough for the whole project. So it's I'm just doing kind of a tight wrap on it. One of the things that's key is to make sure, I think, that that if wires need to break out, that you leave them room to break out. So this is the harness coming from the gauge cluster. You can see I've just done kind of a partial overlap here, missed maybe a little spot. This was the oh, that's for the voltage regulator, and this will be for the tachometer input. Those peel off before I get to the MotoGadget unit, so they have to peel off a little earlier. And then I just left myself some slack at the far end. This will be inside the box. So I'm going to do this other bundle here real quick, and it's pretty easy to put on. I just tie it over itself. I've got it just loosely in my vise right here so that it has a little, I can put a little tension on it. And if there's better techniques for this, I'm certainly open to that. But for right now, I'm just kind of giving it a little bit of a pull. Give it a nice tight wrap. And on this particular bundle, nothing should need to break out earlier. So I'm just going to go to the end of it and hopefully keep things looking kind of nice and neat. Really, I'm never going to have a professional looking job here, but I also don't want to have an amateur job. Mostly it just stresses me out seeing all these wires hanging all over the place. This would be it's always, I'm a mechanical engineer by trade, so it's always the electrical stuff that seems to get in my way. Probably because I do a good job planning for the mechanical stuff and not so good a job planning for the electrical stuff. As you can see, I'm getting a pretty nice tight wrap on that. Maybe not 100% wrinkle free, but I think that's okay. I mostly just don't want, one of the things that happens is when you pull these bundles through, they tend to get caught on things. So by tying them together a little bit more, I'll be able to manage it a little bit better. You can also see, as part of the initial assembly, I'd also added some electrical tape at a couple spots just to kind of keep it managed. I just decided I would leave that on there, hold that whole bundle together. And like I say, it's not very sticky, but it does seem to stick to itself pretty well, which is black magic. It's great. As I get to the end here, what I'll do is cut myself just a little bit of a lead on it. I'm just going to go to my last piece of tape just because I know that hasn't messed me up in the past, so I shouldn't have to unwrap anything, and I can always add a little bit more later if I need to. So here's my last piece of tape right here. So I just got my scissors, cut myself off a little section, square it up and wrap it around itself, and done. So I think that looks a heck of a lot neater. It's going to help me keep things organized on the bike. So I like it. We now have the rat's nest cleaned up pretty well. It looks a lot better in there. There's certainly some improvements that could be made, but by and large, I think it's much, much better. There's several things that have happened. I've wrapped all the wires that come in with that cloth wire wrap. Looks nicer and will keep things cleaner and neater. I've tried to run most of the wires around the perimeter of the box so it's nice and neat. And I've run them through some cable ties that are just kind of snugged up so that to keep stuff out of the way. I trimmed wire lengths so that they route more similarly. Extended a few wires, like down here where you can see I've covered it up with some heat shrink so that I can get around the perimeter where I wanted to. I added this plug in here because one of the things I had done previously was tied a lot of grounds together, and when I was pulling the wiring out, I realized that that made it pretty much impossible to pull some of the wires out without cutting them. So now I can disconnect it here. And the other thing that did for me is I only had 6 positions here in the ground bus, and I needed more like 9 positions, so that allowed me to tie a few extras together. I've got the left and right turn signals in the spots that were originally designated by B&W for the left and the right turn signals. This is lighting here. This is the brake switch circuit tying the front and rear and then into the MotoGadget unit. So it all looks pretty neat. I've tested everything, and amazingly enough, I only got one of the brake light switch circuits backwards. Everything else seems to be working as expected. So Looks a heck of a lot better, and it'll make troubleshooting much easier in the future. I think the only thing left now is to hook up a temporary fuel tank and try to start it. Fingers crossed.